Alright, welcome back to the layout, everyone. So this is going to be part 2 of completing the scenery down here in the lower area. And this time we're going to focus on completing everything in this section. So what we have going on here is we're going to have a strip center here. We have a Chinese takeout restaurant, and then with this open space right here, I'm going to do a small construction yard. So what I've already done is this right here is going to be the parking lot. So I've already cut this and got that painted. And then the strip center, I got that all assembled and painted. That'll be there. And this is the Chinese food takeout. Alright, so we have that. And then, like I said, right here, this is going to be, we'll have a building here, and then a yard for holding construction equipment. So for holding the styrene down, again, for the road surface, all I do is just a plastic styrene, which then I paint. This is actually a primer color, and I put it on thick enough to where it actually starts to orange peel a little bit, so that I do get an asphalt texture to it. And then what I'll do is, once I kind of get everything down, I'm going to come back in and weather this down so it doesn't look so new. So as far as adhering the styrene to the benchwork, I actually use the paint. So I'll set that in place, and then I just put some weights on top of that, and then after a couple hours, after the paint's dried, it's adhered, and I've been happy with that. So like I said, we're gonna go ahead and get everything all painted in place, and as while the paint's wet, that's when I also apply the ground cover as well. All right. So I use Woodland Scenics, blended turf, and Woodland Scenics as well, just as a burnt grass. So I use these two. And I'll just do a couple passes. So I've scattered the green, and I'll come in with the burnt. Okay, so I'm going to apply some weight on this, get that adhering, and then once the paint is dry, obviously the ground cover will be stuck onto that as well. And then another thing I'll do as well, I'll keep an eye out for the thicker parts that starts where the brown starts bleeding through, and apply a little bit more as needed. And then once this is dry, I'll come in with a shop vac and vacuum this all up. Alright, so I have the parking lot installed, I have the car stops, the yellow stripes for the parking spaces. As far as the structures, so you got a strip center here with 3 different stores. This is going to be the Chinese takeout, and then over here this is going to be a yard office for a small construction company. And then so I have signs that I still got to put on the front here along with the takeout, and then I left the roof is able to come off on here, and that way eventually I'll be putting lights inside here, and I'll be able to do some interior details. And then as far as prepping for the lights, I just drill a 1/2-inch hole here in the bench work so that I can run the lighting at a later date. So as far as weathering, the buildings themselves, this is new retail, so you're really not going to have too much on there. I'm going to put a dust coat here on the office, here in the yard, and I like to weather the buildings once I have everything else built around it. So if you look back here where I have my refrigerated warehouse, the rust streaks at the seam, I did that once it was in. And then the other thing that I'm going to do is just put some grime and dust along the brick here at the bottom, just for some rainwater that has splashed against the ballast over time, and dust kick up and so on. But yeah, I really don't like to weather any of the structures until I have this scene built around them. Just kind of help tie it in better that way, I feel. Alright, so I'm going to put the gravel parking lot, and that's just going to be the, I just use a buff fine ballast. And then as far as right here, the only reason why I tape this down is when I'm spraying the alcohol and even the glue. I just don't want any of it getting here on the road, because it'll actually stain it. So as far as spreading it, ain't much difference than if you're going to be doing when you're ballasting your ties. So I just kind of put some out. What I like to use is just use a decent paintbrush and just kind of slowly start grading it out. The other thing that I like doing with having when I'm doing this around the structures is it helps hold them in place, but the structures don't end up actually being fully adhered to the layout. So if I do need to move them or take them out or whatever, I'm able to do that with just a little bit of force with getting them off, and I don't end up causing any damage to the buildings. As far as thickness, I'm just looking for something that gets a good coverage. If you can see right here, it's too thin. I can start to see the the top of the bench work. So I'm just kind of spreading this out. The other part that I like with using a brush like this is that I can come back over here once I have my area defined on for this lot. I can come back in and pull the loose ballast back into it. Alright, so now that I have all the ballast spread out here for the lot, next thing I do is spray my 70% alcohol on here. And I spray it slow at first. If I end up putting a large stream out there, I'm going to start displacing the ballast. I've used some of the other spray bottles that are out there that have a finer mist, and for some reason I just don't like working with them as much, so I just have a cheap spray bottle top that I've had for a long time, and I just put that on these larger bottles of the alcohol, and also if I do end up displacing any of the ballast before I start gluing it, I'll come in and just drop a couple little scoops of ballast as needed. So as I'm doing this, so for anybody that might be new to the hobby, so the reason why you spray the alcohol, and of course my method for gluing this in place is I use just a 50-50 water and Elmer's white glue mix. So by spraying the alcohol first, this wets the ballast down, but the alcohol allows the water and glue mixture to flow through the ballast and hold it all in place. If you didn't spray the alcohol first, what you'd get is you basically get a bunch of pooling as you drop your glue. It's gonna basically just bunch up. Eventually, if you saturated it enough with the glue, it stopped doing that. But at that point, you've washed away the work that you basically have in place. So that's why a lot of us do this method. So the next piece is I just mix up, I have a very large tubs of Elmer's glue, so I just mix the, pour in, the glue straight based on the area that I'm doing. This is just a real small area. Add the water. I have an old brush that I use to mix it, and I just kind of check for the consistency, and once I'm happy with that, and then I just use just a regular drugstore dropper, I should say, and I'll just start it, here on the back, and just kind of work through. So as you can see, because of the alcohol, the glue mix flows right in. So what I'll do is kind of just go back and forth across the area, and then I give that time to soak through. And then eventually what I'll do is I'll come back here again and start putting some in. Another way I can tell once I have the amount that I'd be happy with is when you start to see it pool like this, I know that it's thoroughly saturated. So that's the level that I'm looking for. Really, there is I don't think there's the possibility of putting too much down, other than the fact that if you keep soaking the area, eventually your glue is gonna flow out from the area. So if I just sat here and dump this here, eventually it's gonna flow out into here, and which I don't want. But I would say when you're doing this, it's as long as you're going slow, it's pretty forgiving. It's one of the things that I enjoy about the hobby is there's a lot of artistic freedoms, and then as you develop your skills, I'd say that it's also forgiving in the sense that you are recreating scenes that you would find in nature, and obviously nature is not perfect, and nothing's ever perfectly level and symmetrical and whatnot. So if you're going to be doing a watercolor painting, there's a lot of skill and time put in to make that look good. And there's skill to this, but I think once you know what it is that you can use, being able to do something like this is pretty open to basically anybody that has some patience. So one other thing, in the case where I have the turf already around this area, you can see in these damp spots, that's the glue coming out. So the one thing is this, although it does dry clear, again, come tomorrow you won't see any of this white. It's clear, but I'm just going through right now and looking for any dry spots. But this will come out darker than the areas that are dry next to it. So what I do is I come back through a little bit of the turf and just kind of blend that in, and that'll end up hiding that for the most part. Alright, so that's in place. And again, putting the turf in, and I'll just go real slow. Obviously, if I end up dumping it out on the ballast, it's going to be there to stay, so. If I was, say I wanted to do some overgrowth in this yard, now is actually a good time to do that. I'm not doing that with this one, as this is gonna be an active, busy yard. But if I was gonna be doing something that didn't get much use, or using doing the center line for a gravel driveway, I put the turf weeds ground cover after I've done the glue application. I just find that it sits better doing it that way. Alright, so we have this section done. Kind of just give a quick walkthrough on everything that we have done over here. So starting right here, do have a couple temporary crossbucks in for now. And then we have some landscaping in this area. Strip center's done. This here is the construction yard. Came through and weathered the road.